The time for silence is over. There was once an unprecedented time in American history when common citizens of their day began to define the rights of man and documented how those rights were being violated by their current government. They wrote to each other. They debated with each other. Ultimately, it was these common citizens who recorded these rights for all eternity, and furthermore created a new and free nation founded on these rights with liberty and justice for all of its citizens. Times have changed, but these rights remain.
I don't take responsibility.
That all citizens have the right to life. That all citizens have the right to pursue happiness. That all citizens are created equal. That all citizens have the right to a public trial. That all citizens have the right to peacefully assemble. That all citizens have the right to petition their government. What happens when you try to exercise these rights today? Is this government honoring your rights? Or are they violating them? Is this the government that those citizens aspired to? There is a solution.
I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition. Hello and welcome to The Left Speaks. My name is Chris. Today is August the 1st, 2021, and as always, I will be your host. Sea of Noise, welcome in. I'll address your question here in a moment. Today's episode, 7 months, well, 1 week shy of 7 months removed from the insurrection attempt at the Capitol, for which there still have been no consequences. We're going to be looking at the looming housing crisis since the federal eviction moratorium ended today. We're going to be looking at what's being done, or rather what's not being done, and just how bad this could potentially be. Not only for the families that are evicted, a substantial margin of which, if history is accurate, will end up homeless and in and out of shelters, but also how it'll affect the country overall, and even the citizens, which still manage to maintain their homes. From Sea of Noise, I'm very confused how honoring colonialism and imperialist aesthetic of USA are left. That's a yikes from Sea of Noise, and it seems incongruent with being left. Depends entirely on your definition of being left. I identify as a progressive. I'm not a communist. Are there mistakes that the United States has made in its past? Absolutely. Can we learn from those? Yes. Are there a lot of things we have done correctly? Yes. And does just bashing the country overall help us get any better? I would say no. But thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I'm always welcome to, or always open to having my views challenged, and that's how we learn and grow. Now, to dive straight into the housing crisis. From the New York Times, nationwide moratorium on residential evictions is set to expire on Saturday, which it has. The Biden administration has informed its agencies, FHA and whatnot, to not evict tenants or not evict owners due to COVID complications, unemployment and whatnot. But overall, there is no moratorium on evictions anymore, which went into effect of September 2020 from the CDC in response to COVID. Humbling setback from Biden. Hundreds of thousands of tenants at risk of losing shelter. Tens of billions in federal funding intended to pay back rent has sat untouched. We'll see later it's about 6 to 7% of the money that has been slated for rental relief that has actually gotten to the tenants, which is a huge part of the problem. Initially, President Biden said he was not going to seek to further extend the eviction moratorium, but I would say, as he has seen how little of this money has gotten to the actual people in need, he changed his mind. Unfortunately, that happened about 3 days ago, which is very little time to actually accomplish anything. Certainly not in Congress. Both sides seem to suffer blame from this. Hampered by a lack of action by the Trump administration, no real plan to carry out the program. And then, of course, Biden's been in office for about 6 months now, 6 to 7 months since January the 20th. They've struggled as well to build a pipeline to get the money from the federal government to the state governments to the people, the American citizens who are ultimately in need of this money. $47 billion was slated to be used. We've managed to disperse about 3. Like I said, it's about 7%. Now, to give you an idea of the size, scale, and scope of this problem, normally there are about 1 million evictions every year in the United States. We're looking at a 6-7 times that number coming up. .7% of households in the United States right now today owe back rent. You can see it is predominantly in the southeast United States. There are regions throughout the country that are struggling, but it is very much Georgia, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana. Like I said, you have pockets elsewhere. East Baton Rouge Parish, 19% of renting households own back rent. That's 1 in 5. Georgia, pick a county. They're almost all about 20%. 1 in 5. South Carolina, 27%. 30% back rent. 25%. 1 in 4. In some cases, pushing 1 in 3. These are people that have been in their homes, in a lot of cases, because the eviction moratorium, the you can't evict people during a global pandemic has kept them there. They still owe back rent. 93% of the money slated to help cover this, that's already allocated, that's already passed Congress, is not getting to these people. So that means you have landlords. Disclaimer, I am not a fan of landlords. I am making a statement of fact here, who are not getting paid. Collectively, it is probably not in their best interest to evict 1 in 3 people. Individually, if they are not getting paid, odds are that they will. You're looking very much at a tragedy of the commons type situation, where the individual's decision and what is, in their eyes, most beneficial for them is going to create a crisis. We're also not talking about small amounts of money. Renting households that are behind owe almost $4,000. Now, in this case, the numbers are going to be skewed towards your major metros because rents are higher there typically. If you go down in the deep south, you're looking about $3,000. South Carolina, ouch there. But in a lot of cases, $3,000 is 2 to 3 months worth of rent. And we know good budgets dictate that your housing should be about 30% of your overall income. Disclaimer, most people have to spend more than that on rent, which we'll establish further here in a minute. So while $3,000, $2,100 may not seem like a lot of money to some people, again, in a lot of cases in these smaller, more rural areas where rent is cheaper, that's 2 to 3 months worth of rent. These people are seriously behind. I would argue in a lot of cases through no fault of their own. But this isn't something that they're just going to be able to pop into their bank, pull out of their savings, or magically go back to work a month ago and catch up. And the money that was slated, again, to help solve this problem is basically stuck in bureaucratic red tape because you have 50 different states, one district, District of Columbia, with 51 different sets of rules before you even get to the more local level than that. Trying to get this federal money to an individual that needs $2,100 to stay in their house. And for those of y'all who are not familiar, remember that evictions go on your credit report. If you're evicted, it's not a simple thing of, oh, we'll just go find another place. Because your next landlord is going to pull your rental history, is going to pull a credit report in most cases. And with an eviction on there, we're going to look elsewhere. This is from the Aspen Institute. Last month, 15 million people live in households that are currently behind on their rental payments. 7.4 million adults, 6.5 million households. On a per tenant debt basis, average debt owed to landlords exceeds $3,000. Nearly half of those who are behind on rent anticipate that they will be evicted in the next 2 months. Now, remember earlier we established that prior to COVID-19, you were looking at about 1 million evictions a year, 1 million. Which is we need to do better than that to start with. But I understand that there are going to be some people that get in over their head, that rent a place that they shouldn't be renting in the first place. That's more than what they should be able to spend. I understand that we need, on the other side of that, more affordable housing in certain areas, and that housing and rental prices and cost have vastly outstripped income and income gains and median wages in the United States. But we're talking about going from 1 million to 7.1 million. And half of those tenants are expecting to be evicted, which tells you that half of them openly admit to whoever was doing that survey for the Aspen Institute that they ain't got no way in hell of paying this back right now. The other half may have a way of paying it back, may have a good relationship with their landlord, or may just be counting on something else. Federal government stepping in, state stepping in, wishful thinking. Not seeing any evil that's coming their way. $7 million households compared to 1 million in previous years on average. Kicked out of their homes, potentially. And this hasn't hit yet. National vacancy rates in the second quarter of 2021, 6.2% for rental housing, 9% for homeowner housing. The rental vacancy rate was 0.5 percentage points higher than the rate in the second quarter of 2020. So we haven't seen the spike yet. We're nowhere close to seeing the spike on this. Median asking rent for vacant rental units. Jesus, I couldn't talk there for a second. As you've seen, it's continued to climb and climb and climb. Hello, John. Welcome in. I appreciate you dropping by. So you have rental rates that are continuing to climb, while we have record numbers, 7 times the normal amount of people, that are currently so far behind on their rent that they're expecting to get evicted. And then in terms of sales, from 2005, right before the Great Recession, we started about $110,000, $115,000. We spiked up to 200. After the Great Recession, we dropped back down to 130,000, and we've gone up the same amount that we've almost gone, or that we went up prior to the Great Recession. Only thing I want you to look at on sales is the trend looks very similar, though granted it took slightly longer. And then for rents, we've continued to climb. So unless the market resets, if we evict all of these people, it's not like they can go find cheaper places to live. Rents have been climbing. And if the market resets, then you're looking at potentially what happened during the Great Recession. That's what a massive market reset looks like. Which means if you have money right now, you might be able to go find a place to rent for cheaper. If you don't have money right now, if you owe back rent, and you end up getting evicted, again, your next landlord's going to look at that and assume that he's going to take somebody else that doesn't have an eviction before he takes you. And what do you do while you're waiting on the market to reset? And in case you think I'm exaggerating, from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the last time this many families were behind on their mortgages, not rents, mortgages, so the rents are on top of the mortgages problem, was during the Great Recession. So we've got as many people behind on mortgages as we had right before the Great Recession, and we've got more renters behind on rent than at any time I could find during our history. I didn't go back to the Great Depression, but again, your average is $1 million a year, and we're looking at 7 times that. And that was the low number that I could find. I may be wrong, but unless the federal government steps in, I think we're looking at a bubble that's about to pop. DCH Cello, welcome in. I don't know what the bot caught for you, but try to reword it. My boy Biden sucks. You got to be a little bit more substantial than that. That's a nice opinion, but we know what opinions are like. Yeah, Mod, could you just go ahead and ban him? He doesn't have anything useful to say. Probably a 14-year-old that thinks he's being edgy. I'd say thanks for the follow, but I don't need somebody like that. And Mickey, if you'd keep an eye out, he'll probably come back a few times. Just if he starts that kind of stuff, ban away. Feel free. Everybody else, I apologize for him. You don't even have to time him out when they just want the attention. We're here talking about families getting evicted and a potential recession coming in the United States of America. Nah, just ban him. No worries. And he wants to come in with hate speech that's not related to the topic. Like I said, edgy kid. Hopefully he grows up. From the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, again, I told you the 7 million was the low number. They're estimating 8.8 million. This was in March. The 7 million is from July. The 7 million is the number that I've seen most prevalent, which is why I'm using that, but you can find numbers that are higher in terms of being behind on rent. Best case scenario, that means 8.8 million to 7.1 million since March. So March, April, May, June, July, 4 months. It took that 1 million people to dig their way out of being behind on rent. Again, these 7 million people that are behind on their rent by months, this isn't going to solve itself overnight. The money is already allocated. They need to provide more time to get the money to these people. The shares of renters behind on housing payments vary widely across the country. States with the highest concentration of renters in arrears are in the Southeast, again, as we established earlier, with Mississippi topping the list at 27%, again, 1 in 4, followed by Delaware and Louisiana, Delaware obviously not being in the Southeast, both at 25%, again at 1 in 4. The lowest shares are in the Midwest and Mountain West states, where less than 12% of renters are behind on housing payments in early 2021. So which states are providing their own protections? You know, since the federal government is stepping out, which states are going to step up and cover the people that still need help, their own citizens? Is it going to be the states in the southeastern United States, or is it going to be the ones that don't really need the help? Pause for dramatic effect. You probably already know the answer. Hawaii and Maryland goes through August 15th, or August 6th and August 15th. Illinois and New York have protections to the end of August. California through September. New Mexico, State Supreme Court has to decide to lift their moratorium. New Jersey, renters can't be evicted until the end of the year, 2022. Minnesota is slowly phasing out the bans. Washington, there's going to be an eviction moratorium bridge. New York, similar effort. Oregon, tenants are protected from eviction within 60 days of applying for rental assistance. So if you apply for help, they're going to, hey, you're trying to get the help you need. It's not your fault that it's taken forever to get this damn money to you. So we're not going to kick you out on the streets. That's it. If you're in Georgia, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, you know, the states that we established earlier had this huge problem where they're looking at 1 in 4 people who are renters being behind on rent. I guess you better find some bootstraps because your state ain't going to do jack shit to help you. You're on your own. And again, for all my Republicans out there, Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Households with incomes below $75,000 were more than twice as likely to be behind than households with incomes above $75,000. These disparities held true across all forms of tenure for both homeowners and renters. This is not a situation where people are going to be able to pull themselves out of it. And I think that maybe, just maybe, the fact that we have 7 million as compared to the normal 1, I don't think that 6 million people, even if I assume the 1 million people per year were just lazy bums, I don't believe that. But even if I grant it to you, I don't think that 6 million more people this year just decided to be lazy and quit paying rent and put themselves on an eviction list. So maybe, just maybe, during a global pandemic, we should give them a little bit more time, since we already allocated the damn money and it's not their fault. They didn't design the system to get the money to them, to keep them from getting evicted. Year-end mortgage delinquencies. Again, we're not just talking rental properties here. This is housing. Same thing as we were looking at in 2009. December 2019, 30 to 60 day delinquencies. More people were 30 to 60 days, 1 month to 2 months behind in December 2019 than they were in December 2020, so end of last year. However, look at how many people are 90 days behind. 90 plus in December 2020. Five times. Five times as many mortgages as compared to 2019. And there were more active foreclosures during 2019. Again, because you couldn't kick people out of their homes during the pandemic. And the data suggests renters are struggling even more than homeowners. One in four renters with incomes under $25,000 reported that they were behind on their rent. Again, this is skewed to those who do not make great amounts of income. It's skewed to the working poor. That is not surprising. Dash Mickey, in my opinion, this has been coming for a while. Financial struggle was already happening, bordering the poverty line. Making rent was always the main struggle for me, being a single mom. The fact alone that it takes two parents working to make it over the poverty line just proves, to me anyways, that when COVID hit, something like this was going to happen, especially taking away most of the population's income and not really receiving enough assistance. I think, unfortunately, you're very right on that. We were one of the few developed nations, industrially developed nations, that didn't apply some kind of consistently ongoing payment plan. Like Britain, you got X% of your income till the pandemic was over. Canada was the same way. A lot of states, a lot of other nations, a lot of other developed nations, nations we would consider comparable, you know, Germany, England, Canada, provided ongoing assistance through the pandemic. Whereas we sent out 2 or 3 checks, depending on how you want to count it. Not a month, not every pay period, over the course of a year. And then essentially we told the landlords, these people that didn't have any savings, well, you can't kick them out. We're going to provide money to them, assistance to them, to pay you. And then that got tied up in the red tape. Instead of passing something that every other country passed, and giving money back to its citizens to shut down for the length of time we needed to shut down for the pandemic. Granted, we handled the shutdown like shit. But instead of handing it to the citizens and saying, hey, we know you can't work, but here's 70% of your income. Your expenses should be down because you're not having to travel back and forth to work and you're not having to eat out lunches and that sort of thing. But take care of your bills. And we're going to have a federally structured, hey, we're all going to shut down for these 4-6 weeks, whatever it was. And then do trap and trace and contain the pandemic after that, because we'll have let it, burn itself out by keeping everybody away from each other. No, we did this half-assed. Here's a check. Oh, 8 months, 9 months go by. Here's another check. And in the meantime, you can't get evicted. We have 7 times the number of renters that are behind on rent, substantially behind. We have 4 to 5 times the number of mortgages as compared to 2019 that are behind over 90 days, over 3 months. And why? Because we didn't want to trust people to pay their bills first? Oh, because it was going to cost too much? Does anybody remember how much 2009, the recession, cost the economy? Cost everybody in savings? Cost everybody in the stock market? Cost everybody's retirement accounts? So we're looking at the same damn inconsequence, plus potentially a whole lot of American citizens homeless. Dash Mickey, unfortunately, I was clueless of it in 2009. I was in the mortgage business leading up to that. It was a mess. And I'm not going to rehash all of 2009, but the short version is housing prices kept going up, no matter what you did, kind of like they're doing right now. And banks got real creative with mortgages because the regulations were relaxed about who could and who couldn't borrow money and how they had to evaluate those risks. And all of a sudden, when housing prices quit going up and they started plateauing or going down a little bit, the people that couldn't afford their homes couldn't just sell it anymore and get out. So you had people that would buy $300,000 house that couldn't afford a $300,000 house. And then they would flip it a month, 2 months, 6 months later for $320,000, $330,000. So it didn't matter that they couldn't really make the real payments on the house. So when the market quit going up and all those people that were in $300,000 houses couldn't just flip it and make some money, well, then the market started cratering because those houses started getting repossessed or foreclosed on. Now we're looking at people months and months behind on houses, renters months and months behind on houses. And we can't get 93% of the money allocated to them in time. Again, serious mortgage delinquency rate by loan type from quarter 1, 2005 to quarter 3, 2020. I want to draw your attention to 2009, which they don't draw your attention to, but I'm pretty sure we can eyeball between 2008 and 2011, slightly closer to 2011. You can see when the recession started happening. That was at 9.4% serious mortgage delinquency rate. FHA loans are there again. All loans aren't, not yet. Most borrowers that have exited forbearance so far have been able to resume payments. 28% remained current during forbearance. Now, last time we were looking at those kinds of stats, look at the number of foreclosures you were looking at. Again, this is 2009. Right? Exceedingly high compared to your previous years. 2020, it hasn't hit yet. Again, you're looking at the same set of circumstances, roughly, plus renters that you were looking at in 2009. Eviction filings across select cities and states in 2020 versus the historical average. Look at the gap. Hundreds of thousands. And again, they haven't been allowed to be evicted yet. That was yesterday. Today, in 40 states, that is no longer the case. Disproportionately affects minorities. December 2020, the federal government allocated $25 billion to the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. During the same time period, researchers estimated that renters owed $44.1 billion, so not quite 2 times. So not only did we cover a little over half of what was supposed to be covered or what needed to be covered, to keep these families in their homes. We can't get that money to them. And then today we just said, okay, well, we'll let it expire anyway. So now all these individual landlords who haven't been getting paid for months, again, you're talking months and months of back rent here, can file for eviction. Hockey Puck, please try again using clean English. Now, let's look at some states that do eviction moratoriums well versus what protections still remain in other states. Eviction Lab from Princeton has ratings on all of this. Out of 5 stars or 5 points, you can look at each individual state and the District of Columbia and see what kind of protections they offer you from being evicted, what kind of things they've put in place to keep people in their homes, again, American citizens in their homes, to try and A, help out the individual, but B, keep their state's economy rolling or their district. Washington, D.C. is at the top of the list with a renting population of, I'm just going to round it to 360,000. Washington, D.C. has enacted one or more high-impact policies. Moratorium extends past the emergency declaration. No utility disconnection. There's a foreclosure on moratoriums. Housing stabilization. You can't raise rent. There's no late fees right now. And eviction records are sealed. So if you do end up getting evicted after all this is said and done, it's sealed so you can go get another place. Nevada, my current home state, with a rental population of 1.2 million. Eviction record sealed. No late fees. Housing stabilization. They can still raise rent on me. Damn it. Foreclosure moratorium. No filing if tenant has COVID-19 hardship. No filing for non-payment. No filing except emergencies. So that's what good looks like. And again, these aren't the high at-risk states. Let's look at bad. Arkansas. Well, they can't disconnect your utilities. They'll reconnect your utilities for free if they mess that up. However, they can file on you if you have a COVID-19 hardship. They can file on you for non-payment. They can file on you even including emergencies or not emergencies. They can charge you late fees. They can raise your rent. No legal counsel for you, just your landlord, unless somehow, if you know, even though you couldn't pay your rent, you can afford to go get an attorney. Well, hey, there you go. Eviction records aren't sealed, goes on your record. So I think in the state of Arkansas, with the exception of reconnecting your utilities, I can sum it up as, fuck you, you're on your own. Fisty Talks, am I getting evicted? And oops on the caps lock. No, I am not getting evicted. However, 7 million Americans, by the conservative number I can find, are currently at risk of being evicted. 7 million. That includes renters, and then you've got mortgages on top of that. The normal number of evictions we see in a year in the United States is about 1 million. That's the best ballpark estimate I could find by the guy that literally wrote the book on it before the pandemic. We're looking at 7 times that number. It's rough. And hey, welcome back. I appreciate you being here. And for Arkansas, that affects 963,000 citizens. Georgia, remember Georgia being terribly on that list in the southeast of the United States? Georgia also scores a 0 out of 5 for renter protections against eviction during COVID-19. 3.6 million renting in Georgia. Georgia did not implement any statewide eviction moratorium during the pandemic. They won't even connect your utilities or reconnect them, and they'll disconnect them if you can't pay them during the pandemic. Of course, that eviction is going to go on your record. And what was it we were glancing at in Georgia? 1 in 4 renters right now is currently months behind on their rent. %, 1 in 5, 20.7%, 19.5%. Yeah, so 1 in 5 in Georgia owe back rent. 1 in 5. The eviction moratorium ended today. In Georgia, you are entirely on your own. 1 in 5 out of 3.6 million people. No problem, man. Glad to join the stream. Not at the end. Hey, man, I appreciate you being here. I always appreciate you being here. And yes, the disconnect is very real. Let's check out one of our other states. Louisiana, my former home state. 0.38 out of 5. They won't disconnect your utilities. However, they can file if you're not paying your rent. So you can have utilities that they can't disconnect at the house that you've been evicted from. I guess that's something. No legal counsel for the tenants. They did extend some deadlines, and hearings are suspended. That suspension has been allowed to expire. It seems like the states that need this the most basically aren't doing anything about it. Georgia is a real peach? Yeah, unfortunately in this case. From NYU. Evictions increase the probability of applying to a homeless shelter by 14 percentage points. Increase the days, the share of days spent in a shelter during the 2 years after filing by 5 percentage points, or about 36 days. All of the estimated effects are large and persist beyond the first 2 years of case filing, through all the post-filing years. Avoiding eviction does not simply delay an inevitable bout of homelessness, but rather leads to a lasting difference in the odds of experiencing homelessness. So if you don't get evicted, it's not just delaying the chance or delaying when you're going to be homeless. By not getting evicted, your odds of being homeless ever go substantially down. And then once you become homeless, eviction increases your chances of being homeless substantially, and then increases the amount of time you're going to spend in the homeless system substantially. That was the only study I could find on it. Based on New York, there's very limited research into it. And again, that was from New York University, NYU. Even if you're people should pull themselves up by their bootstraps, as I said earlier. The average number of evictions we look at in this country is about 1 million. It's not like suddenly overnight, 6 million more people this year decided, screw it, I'm not going to pay my rent. And in most of these cases, we are looking at months of back rent. This is not something that they can go borrow from friends, family, etc. especially not when you're looking at 1 in 5 in the state of Georgia and 1 in 4 in like the state of South Carolina. This is a big, major problem that if we don't do something damn near immediately is going to start hitting very soon. These cases are going to start being filed in court by the individual landlords. I would imagine starting tomorrow. Today is a Sunday. This is when the eviction moratorium expired. Tomorrow's Monday. Tomorrow is a day when the courts are open. Now, this is a little bit dated information. Individual investors tend to decrease with property size, but individual investors owned about half of rental units. So again, you're not talking about landlords being big companies in a lot of cases, about half the time. Your big apartment complexes and stuff like that, sure. But a lot of these single family homes and whatnot, these are individual investors. So in a lot of cases, they don't have the money to keep carrying this either. Fisty talks, this is a tough situation for evictions with everything that's happened in the past 2 years. Oh, the sound cut out for a second. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, this is a tough situation with everything that's gone on in the last about year and a half. And the bigger problem is, so when Democrats passed the CARES Act, we allocated about half the amount of money that researchers estimated needed to cover rent and back mortgages. We've managed to get 7% of that out to the people. It's been tied up in 50 different states worth of regulations and the District of Columbia's regulations. 7% of people who are eligible, or 7% of the money has been claimed and gone to landlords to pay back rent, essentially. The stream showing muted on you guys' side? I'm showing the mic going through. Y'all check me. Okay. Still no sound? Can you hear me? I'm showing clear on my side, guys. I'm looking it over and I'm not seeing anything. That is the strangest thing. I'm sorry, Twitch for some reason is not getting volume, but I don't know why. So to all the Twitch streamers, I apologize. But YouTube's still showing sound? Okay. Then I guess we're going to drive on. I'm sorry to all of my Twitch viewers. I don't know what is causing that. We'll restart at the break. We're almost there anyway. We're also looking at household debt that's exceeding the 2008 level. Again, so it's not just houses. People are behind overall. Now, who's responsible is going to be the next question we dive into. Hey, Fisty, welcome in. I appreciate you dropping by YouTube. Thank you for following me. Is the volume better there? I don't know what the hell's going on with Twitch. So, from Fox Business. The White House allowed the federal eviction moratorium to expire Saturday, urged Congress to take legislative action to keep it going, push for the distribution of billions of dollars. So that's how we lead off. But then Democrats were dismayed by President Biden's decision not to challenge the Supreme Court's ruling that the moratorium had to end after July, leaving lawmakers scrambling to draft a bill following the president's Thursday announcement, like I said, 3-4 days ago, that he would not try to extend it. He changed his mind on that. Yeah, Twitch must be on some BS, man. I don't know what's going on with that, but I appreciate you following me. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube, too, if you followed me over here. We are only hours away from a fully preventable crisis. From Elizabeth Warren, Democrat. We have the tools and we have the funding. What we need is the time. Representative Maxine Waters, I know she's really popular among Republicans, rushed to draft a bill that would have extended the moratorium to the end of 2021 because, again, the money is already allocated. But Republicans opposed the hasty action. This is not a way to legislate. Representative Kathy McMorris Rodgers, Republican of Washington. Normally, I would tend to agree. However, the 7 million people who are at risk of having themselves and their families kicked out onto the fucking street would probably appreciate it if you would bend the rules a little bit in this particular instance, since the money's already allocated, to get the time to get the money to them. Or hell, directly to their landlord, so they don't get evicted. I don't think anybody would mind if you bent the rules just a little bit about what you consider normal legislative process. I think a global pandemic and 7 million people at risk of being evicted, as compared to the normal 1 million, would be all the justification you would need to legislate in a slightly abnormal way. Uncle Max is what you call her. She's so aggressive and mean. That just sounds like an excuse. It sounds like a bunch of bullshit to not do something that needs to be done. Now, They have extended, the Biden administration has extended the eviction freeze by the FHFA, Federal Housing Finance Agency, and the Federal Housing Administration. So their own personal administrative processes, their own departments that the executive branch can control, he has said they're not going to move forward. That still leaves everybody else that's not covered by that, that doesn't have an FHA loan, essentially. But these two agencies won't be moving forward. At least not initially. Again, from Fox Business, House Democrats are rushing forward. God, I hate their website. It's cancer. House Democrats were rushing forward to set up an 11th hour vote on a bill that would extend nationwide ban on evictions hours before the freeze was poised to expire, putting millions of renters at risk of losing their homes. Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leaders were struggling to secure enough votes. A number of moderate Democrats opposed the bill. I wish he had asked us sooner. I do too. That's not an excuse for not doing your job and keeping people from getting kicked out of their homes and potentially tanking the entire economy. Even if Pelosi secured enough votes, the bill would almost certainly die in the Senate, barring the unlikely feat of 10 Republicans voting for it. Now, I just want to point out again, this is Fox. I'm not picking some mainstream media liberal news rag to blame it on the Republicans. Moderate Democrats hold a certain amount of blame in this, absolutely. But even if we got it through the House, Fox doesn't think we could get Republicans to vote for it. I tend to agree with him. So what put us in this whole mess in the first place? Remember that Supreme Court case we talked about where they said, oh yeah, it has to end in July? 5-4 vote, the court left in place a nationwide moratorium on evictions. Alabama Association of Realtors had challenged it. Brett Kavanaugh, one of Trump's appointments, cast the fifth and deciding vote that he voted not to end the eviction program because it was going to expire yesterday anyway. So he said, yeah, we can leave the eviction moratorium in place because it's going to expire on July 31st anyway. He added that in his view, Congress would have to pass new and clearer legislation for the moratorium to extend past July 31st. At the time, the Biden administration had said that it did not plan to extend the moratorium any further anyway. So this is what they were referring to when they said Democrats were pissed that Biden didn't challenge the Supreme Court decision. So the Trump appointee, Kavanaugh, said, we can leave it in place till July 31st, but if you want to do anything past July 31st, you're going to have to go through Congress. Who agreed with leaving the program intact? John Roberts, Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan. Dissenting Clarence Thomas, Alito, Amy Coney Barrett, and Neil Gorsuch. Your Republican appointees were all the ones in the dissent, which would have said, yeah, it needs to end right now. Evictions could begin as soon as Monday, as I was mentioning. It looks like both the White House and Congress expected the other one to act. And this is where we are. Again, we're not just talking about a few Americans here. We're not talking about a unlucky few for those who don't seem to, or for those who want to accuse every liberal or Democrat of having a bleeding heart. Granted, sometimes that's, guilty as charged. You're looking at 7 times the normal number of people that are up for eviction right now, or who are eligible for eviction. You're looking at, 4-5 times the number of houses as compared to 2019 that are over 90 days past due on their mortgage. We haven't seen this many mortgages this far past due since the Great Recession of 2009. And then we add the renters on top of it, where you have states where 1 in 5 and 1 in 4 are past due on their rent. Even if you think that everybody should suffer the consequences of their actions, and that somehow not being able to work during a pandemic is the fault of the individual, if you don't think that the economic repercussions of letting this just do what it's going to do and not interfering at all aren't going to be huge, Fisty, I think you're about as old as I am, brother. And I remember 2009. Hell, I was in mortgages prior to that, not the subprime stuff that caused it all, but just regular old mortgages. Man, stuff was shutting down left and right. I don't know what to say besides call your congressman. I'd say write a letter because they tend to listen to that more. But it ain't going to reach there by Monday. So email, call, tweet, reach out on social media, and not just your federal level congressman. Start hitting your states too, especially if you live in these southeastern states, where the problem is even worse than it is elsewhere. David GL, welcome back. Government ain't going to help you, LOL. I don't ask them for anything. David GL, are you in the United States of America? I don't need to know exactly where you are. Oh, you are? You ever drive on an interstate highway? I'm just curious. You ever use a cell phone with those 4G, 5G towers that we subsidized help building? An internet connection that you're, communicating to me through? I know you use that. Guess government ain't never done nothing for you, brother. Well, I'm not the one personally in need of the help. I'm not getting evicted anytime soon. I'm current. I stayed working the entire time through the pandemic. And hell, honestly, for me individually, it would lower rental prices and it would probably lower house prices. But going from 1 million evictions average on year to, I don't know, 7 seems like a whole lot of homeless people that we don't, aren't contributing to the economy anymore, aren't buying things, aren't selling things, aren't working. Because homeless people have problems getting hired. Doesn't seem like a good idea for the country. And I don't think magically 6 million people just got lazy this year, more than every other year. But I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate your perspective. And I think you just dropped that get evicted every year, just bought too much house or rented too much house or, lost their job because they were terrible workers and couldn't afford where they lived anymore. Normally we see 1 million evictions a year in this country. We have 7 million people right now, 50% of whom expect to be evicted in the coming months. I don't think we magically found 6 million more lazy people as compared to every other year. It's both good and kind of sucks that the only people who have a chance are those who were able to work during the pandemic. If we can get the eviction moratorium extended, the money is already allocated. At least a large part of it. And if we can keep people in their homes, we know earlier from the study I referenced that their odds of ever becoming homeless go substantially down. It's not like you just delay it. It's not like if you say, oh, you're not evicted, then they just become homeless a month later. That's not the way that the data bears out. So we can do something. It's just whether we're going to choose to or not. But past that, guys, that's really all I've got on the eviction moratorium expiring. So if anybody's got any questions, feel free to fire away. If not, we're just going to wrap up a little bit early this time around. I really need to space those notifications out a little bit better. Any questions? Going once. Going twice. Sold unless somebody interrupts my exit. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. I know it's a dry subject and there's a lot of data and a lot of just dry information, dollars and numbers and etc. But I encourage everybody not to lose track of the fact that 7 million isn't just a number. There are individuals and families that are associated with that number. If you live in the Southeast and you're renting an apartment, go knock on the 3 doors next to you. Hell, I'll be generous. Go knock on 4 doors. Because remember, in the state of Georgia, 1 in 5 is currently behind and eligible for eviction. So either you or one of those 4 doors you knock on is currently behind and has been protected by this eviction moratorium. And the money's already allocated. to keep these people in place and to catch them up. This isn't just some random number that we're picking out of thin air. These are friends and family members. I know people back home in Louisiana that this applies to. But if you're having a problem because it's so dry and it's so vague, most of us have lived in an apartment at some point in time. Pick 4 doors. And ask which one you want to kick out of that 4, out of that 5, counting yourself. Then pick 5 more doors and do the same thing till you go through the entire apartment complex. These are real people. Fellow American citizens. And the money's already there. We just need the time to cut through the red tape to get it to them. Push your congressmen. Push your senators. Especially those of you who vote Republican and from red states. This is affecting the red states more than the blue ones. The solid South. This doesn't need to be a partisan thing, even though it's becoming one. Mustard Freak 69, pay your rent, libtards. I have. I'm caught up. I was never behind. I worked all the way through the pandemic. If you think evicting 6 million more people this year than on average is because people are just lazy, I don't know what to tell you, brother. Nancy Pelosi going on vacation. Yeah, I agree. They need to drag all their asses back to Congress. Occupy Congress until this is solved. You know, but without beating people with flagpoles. But anyway, that's going to wrap us up for today. Mustard Freak, I apologize. You caught the end of it. If you follow and subscribe every Sunday, 2 to 4 p.m., number is toll free. Any subject you want to call in on, feel free. If you actually have anything substantive to contribute, you're more than welcome. This isn't just to hear myself talk, but it's to talk to you guys and those of y'all that disagree with me. Because at the end of the day, I would rather figure out the truth than be wrong. But anyhow, that's going to wrap us up, everybody. Thank y'all and have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Thank you for the follow, Mustard. Appreciate it.
Is over. The time for silence is over.
There was once an unprecedented time in American history when common citizens of their day began to define the rights of man and documented how those rights were being violated by their current government. They wrote to each other. They debated with each other. Ultimately, it was these common citizens who recorded these rights for all eternity, and furthermore created a new and free nation founded on these rights with liberty and justice for all of its citizens. Times have changed, but these rights remain.
I don't take responsibility.
That all citizens have the right to life. That all citizens have the right to pursue happiness. That all citizens are created equal.
that all citizens have the right to a public trial, that all citizens have the right to peacefully assemble, that all citizens have the right to petition their government. What happens when you try to exercise these rights today? Is this government honoring your rights? Or are they violating them? Is this the government that those citizens aspire to? There is a solution.
I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition.